So welcome everybody to the best practice in balancing school fees and pastoral care, which is part of our Lunch and Learn professional development series. Now, as always, we know you guys are very, very busy in schools and your time's valuable. So we thank you for making the time, and we know Alistair is going to present an exceptional session today. I'm going to just share my screen and get us started. So when people come in, they're not just looking at panelists. As much as we love all the panelists.
We love the panelists.
We love the panelists. So we're looking forward to a great session today. So today, our presentation is actually done by the Head of Growth for EdStart, who are building a terrific reputation in the industry for making school fees easy for parents and schools. So we know at Catholic Schools Guide, this can be a tricky topic to wade through at schools, and EdStart certainly have a lot of valuable experience that Alistair is going to be sharing with us today. But before I do introduce our key speaker, I know that Greg Campitelli, our Director and Publisher of Catholic Schools Guide, and let's face it, the reason that we're here today, he would love to personally welcome you. So Greg, over to you for a moment.
And people might know me, Greg Campitelli, Director of Catholic Schools Guide and Publisher of that. We've been doing that since 2010, but I have spent, Margaret, 40 years in the not-for-profit and education sector as a teacher, Director of Admissions, been on several boards in Catholic schools and committees, etc. I also have done many, oops, I'll turn off my, silence my do not disturb here, Margaret, so we're not going to get pinged all the time. I'm also the co-founder of a company called Inquiry Tracker that many Catholic schools are using across Australia to capture leads and grow enrolments. But today is very much about Catholic Schools Guide. Christy and I are very proud of the fact that we've been publishing the magazine since 2010. And predominantly that's been Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane centric. There are 3 different print editions that come out annually. It's a very glossy and beautiful publication, gives that 12-month coffee table feel. But over the last few years, we've really pushed our website and to give it that really truly national feel. And interestingly, Margaret, every single Catholic secondary school in Australia is listed for free on our website right now. And if it's not there, I'd like you to check it. But there's a big wow offer that we want to do at the end of the session today. It's pretty amazing, which I hope you will stay on and listen for, because there is a really great offer that will actually cost you no money, which is extraordinary. So anybody who hears no, and there's no tricks, okay? So we're really proud that the Catholic Schools Guide website, we believe now, is the premier website of its kind. It is the only website of its kind that solely promotes Catholic primary and secondary education as a destination of choice. You can find any school in Australia, and you've got to be Catholic to be in it. So I think that is a celebration of our sector, and I'll hand over to you, Margaret, to introduce our great guest speaker and good friends of Catholic Schools Guide and Inquiry Tracker, great people at EdStart who are doing some amazing stuff.
Terrific. Thank you, Greg. So as you can see, we have Alistair here. So he's actually joining us as a presenter, and I actually love this photo of you, Alistair. This looks like you have just been playing rugby. So for you guys, sit back tight. Alistair Edmonds has worked in the ed tech industry for his entire professional career. So his roots are in technology driving learning outcomes, but for the last 2 years, Alistair's been working with EdStart to revolutionise school fees for parents and schools alike. So EdStart works with over 600 schools across the country and has unique insight into the challenges faced by schools around fees. Now, of course, given the current economic pressures faced by parents, Alistair hopes to share how the market-leading schools balance financial sustainability and, really important for our Catholic schools, the pastoral care when it's needed most. So please welcome Alistair. It's great to have you here. I'm going to hand over control to you now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Margaret. I'll just share my screen.
Yep.
Lovely to be here today and speak to all of you across the country. Thank you for the introduction. I did look a little bit more fresh and sprightly in that photo, but we're getting there. Another coffee will get me there today. Just wait for this to load up. As Margaret said, and thanks to the team at Catholic Schools Guide, we really appreciate the partnership we have with them and the ability to present today to Catholic schools across the country. It's a topic that we hold pretty close to our heart, and for reasons that I'll get into in a second. But thank the team, Margaret, Greg and Christy, for the opportunity today. Really looking forward to it and jumping into this topic a little bit deeper. So let's jump into it. Just a quick agenda so you know what I'm going to go through today and the reasons why I'm going through certain things. A quick welcome and introduction around EdStart and who we are. Not to be just talking about EdStart, but more why we think we have credibility and to speak in this space and why we hold it so dear to us, and just some examples of that as well. From there, I'm going to move on to the modern reality of household budgets. What does income and spending look like for families at your schools, but also at your schools, and what does it look like for them right now with the current climate where it's sitting? I think that'll give us a great lens to look through when we're talking about pastoral care and school fees, and why this topic is more important than ever at the moment. School fees become more difficult, but pastoral care becomes more difficult when there's a higher volume, and how we can develop frameworks and strategies to do that better across the school sector as a whole. From there, we're going to move through to maintaining robust payment cultures, but also doing that without the cost of pastoral care, which we know is so important for Catholic schooling, and probably the centre, and I would say the sector that does it the best across the country, and why we need to speak about that a little bit as well. In that robust payment cultures, I don't want to be speaking about how we think you should do your jobs. That is not what this is about at all. What I want to get insight into is how we do it, but more so how we see the best schools, independent and Catholic, systemic, non-systemic, do this around the country. We get such a good cross-section into where it goes right, but also where it goes wrong. And I think both of those will give you some good insight as to where you want to move your school and the direction you want to take around fees and pastoral care moving into 2023. So let's dive into it. A quick recap. I know Margaret did a great job. Couldn't really say it better myself around who EdStart is. We've been around for 6 years now, started by Jack Stevens and Jonas Hallaby. So two co-founders, Jack's background being a chartered accountant and working in that industry and management consultancy, and Jonas' background being in technology. It created a perfect symmetry for our why, and we believe we have two real big founding principles. One is education is the most important investment that anyone can make for their child, which I know is held true across the education sector. And secondly, we think that finance in education could not just be done better, but so much better, and doesn't receive the support that other sectors do, and should be receiving that support from business and technology and schools alike across the board as we move into a very technology-centric future. So that's a little bit about why we started. As Margaret said, we've now moved to work with 600 schools, education providers and colleges across the country over the last 6 years. Bearing in mind the first 3 years and 4 years that we actually started, we were very customer-centric, and by customer-centric, I mean we went direct to parents. We actually didn't work with schools as innately. That came about as schools asked that to happen, and it's just something that's really evolved with EdStart. And now we're very proud of the work we do with schools, and we feel like we've make a bigger impact from that direction. So all different sectors, Catholic, non-systemic, and systemic schools, we work with them across the country. Some of the bigger names down here as well. Obviously, we have two sides now. For schools, what we try to do is paying invoices up front, making sure there's key cash flow and very predictable cash flow for schools so they can support their financial stewardship. But more importantly for families, what we really do is increase flexibility and choice, allowing families to align school fee payments with their budgets, and really working with them quite closely to make sure the fees they're paying for schools are sustainable and they can keep that going to support their child's education. Won't dwell there for too long. This part here, I think, is more just to frame why we think we are really good at what we do in terms of pastoral care ourselves. We don't have the connection that I know you guys do in the schools sector, but we're still very proud of what we do here. We ask our families every year, how likely are you to recommend friends and family to EdStart, which is a pretty well-known method for understanding schools. we put some key figures here. Bunnings, obviously a highlight. They're always world-class, and we think they should be. But we're very proud of where we sit, which is at 83. So really high up there. And we hope we keep this year in, year out. I know it makes my CEO nervous every year, but we're very proud of the personal connection we have with our families. Even from a financial industry perspective, obviously banks don't have the best name. You see CommBank and Bendigo down there. But we're very proud of that, to be leaders in that finance sector in terms of how we support our customers. Great. I'm going to dive into the nitty gritty, but the data that's going to really frame our conversations today and why pastoral care is more important than ever. And I think it's important for us to share this, although it's not innately about pastoral care. I think it's something that's important for you all to be aware of, and you probably all are already. It just puts it into perspective in the numbers. I think more generally across the board, things are changing quickly, and quickly than they have for the best part of a decade, if not 2 decades. This is obviously our rate rise increase, which you can see in 2022. We haven't seen anything like it since 1994. Obviously, families don't care that much about the RBA rate, some of them, if they're not too inclined on the economic side. But what they do really care about is how that could affect things in their life, like their mortgage. And a lot of these families, in their time of having a house or having a mortgage in general, haven't felt the rates that they're feeling right now. For the best part of the decade, it's been either decreasing or stable. But more importantly, they haven't felt change this quick. It's been quite stable and flatlined and plateaued. But now what they're seeing is that changing rapidly. They don't have the frameworks, a lot of them, to adjust their budgets to that and how it might impact their budgets proactively, and almost on the back foot and reacting. And it's something that we're seeing a lot right now with our families and how they're working, but also our schools and how their families are going as well. And it's something to be really conscious of, not to be scared of, but to get on the front foot about, which we'll talk about this afternoon, and really not hide away from the fact that there are these pressures at the moment. Obviously, it's not just around mortgages that this can impact. There's other compounding factors at the moment across the economy that are impacting our families. The other one is our cost of living pressures, which we hear about far too often at the moment. I wish I could turn the news on and not hear it, but it is something that's affecting all of us, but also all of your families. There's a lot of hype about wage growth being a thing at the moment. Despite all the media hype, we're not seeing that reflected in the numbers just yet. It's staying still pretty flatlined and nowhere near the pace that cost of living has moved to, and it's still going at well past the dates on this chart here. A lot of our families, even if they don't have a mortgage, are feeling the pinch now because of this as well, which is really affecting their overall budget. Diving into a mortgage as a percentage of income, which I think is a nice thing to look at. We don't often think about it like that. This is data from our actual families. It's real data of their disposable income. How much are they putting towards their mortgage repayments? In Jan 2022, it's still sitting at a pretty high level. In New South Wales and Vic, as you'd expect, are sitting a little bit higher at around just above 25%, a quarter of their disposable income being put aside to mortgage. Given where rates are going, where that's likely to move to is this slide here. That's a large increase across the board. Some of these are almost close to a 10% increase of that part of their budget. That's something, as we said, and it's not moving there slowly, it's moving there really, really fast. So adjusting to that difference and how that's affecting their lifestyle is really difficult. And it's reflected across the board, not just in New South Wales and Victoria. A 6% rise in Queensland and South Australia, and similarly in WA, isn't small. So this is something that's really affecting our families at the moment. I'm speaking about it as a family example, but let's actually have a look into that and dive into what this could look like for a family. This is an average of a lot of our families and what their budgets do look like. We have to do this when we put families through assessments for our more loan facility type products. And what you've got here is the average family is spending 26% on mortgage fees, 23% on school fees. Granted, we work with more independent schools and non-systemic schools, so that's probably where there's a greater portion here. But I'd say even for our systemic Catholic schools, there are other pressures at play here, whether it's car loans, other loans, cost of living pressures in that other portion that are playing a bigger role in their budget. And what we see across the board is around this somewhere around for our families a 12.6% surplus. So a little bit of a gap, a little bit of cushion room. With that shifts we were just speaking about before of both the CPI increase, but also the mortgage rate. This is where that's shifting to in terms of the portion. 3% is that average. That doesn't leave much room for error, and it leads a lot of needed planning for families. Some have the financial literacy to do so, but a lot don't. And it can force those areas and families going down bad paths of debt, which we see quite often, and I'll go into in a second. That really can impact our families and require us to understand who needs that support and who needs that pastoral care more than anyone else. What it also means is there's going to be a higher volume of people just not being planned. They might be able to afford, but it's just a higher volume who are coming back to you saying, look, this is, don't know how to manage these school fees at the moment, along with everything else that's happening in my life financially. Great. So I don't want to dive into the numbers too much. I know I'm a bit of a data geek, so I get stuck there sometimes. So I'm going to jump away from that right now and move more to pastoral care and school fees. There are 2 more graphs, but then I promise I'll stop. And we'll move to more talking about families and what we see schools doing really well. And I'll try and dwell there for a little bit. So some important things to keep in mind, and this is one of those last two bits of numbers. Actually, there's 3 more pages of numbers. I lied to you, but that's all right. I added these one in last minute. Some food for thought, and this is definitely not groundbreaking news to all attendees today, but 1 in 5 Australian students attend a Catholic school. That's a large number and a large cross-section of the Australian population. So they're different donut charts that I just showed you before are going to be all varying kinds across the country, different circumstances, but all feeling that pinch in some way or another at the moment. Nearly 40% of Catholic schools are located in regional, rural and remote areas. A fantastic stat, and I think it's not recognised enough what Catholic schools do in this space, but really supporting those families. And sometimes around school fees can be a lot more lumpy in regional areas and due to agriculture or whatever it is, and they need just as much support as any other family about keeping their kids through education. And 41% of Catholic school students are funded for social educational disadvantage. Again, something that isn't mentioned enough, the work that Catholic schools do in the area of making school affordable and accessible to a broad range of the Australian population, but also impacting the educational sector in Australia as a whole more widely. I mentioned that one just because of the complexities that can add to school fees and how we collect and how we speak to families and the level of care we have to take with these families who might be partially funded or fully funded, depending. This is an underlying story, I think, that might be reflective of what you see with your school fees across the board. This is actually one of the schools where we manage all the school fee receivables for the school. It's our Head Start Plus program. So this is 2020 and 2021, an area of pain for a lot of families, but probably not as painful as right now across the board. There were certain families who were obviously struggling a lot more during the pandemic. And I think it is a reflective graph of what you probably see yourself. One, in this section over here, the unique payment plans. Of the 150 families at the school, 100 plus unique plans. People taking out fees on a Tuesday because it suits their income better. People wanting more one fortnight than the next fortnight due to different incomes of different parents. All those conversations that need to happen to set up those plans that'll suit that family and stop them getting to stages where they might be falling behind. The other part here is the missed payments, and something that we're seeing increase at the moment, given those pressures I've spoken about. 110, that was just across 2021, which is a very high number, obviously. For us, and I know this is what all schools will do as well, this isn't something where you can just email back to the family and go, cool, you missed your repayment, make another payment. We need far more care than that. And that's where we get our numbers from. And I know that's where schools, and there's some fantastic accounts receivable teams, but business managers and alike out there who care about their families to this level where it's straight away, it's on the phone. What's actually the problem at the moment? How can we help? These are the different ways we could go about skinning this cat. We could do a payment holiday for now, or we could spread it over the next 3 months. Fortunately, we have the technology that makes that very easy for us, but I know it's something that schools do across the board and should and will need to continue to do. There will just be a higher volume of that as we move through. Even here, I think this is just a more diving into one specific family that we had in the last year. This is quite reflective of a lot of families. The amount of touch points across that year is just amazing. It's like both inbound and outbound. Calls, emails, the family having different problems throughout the year and struggling in different ways and needing an adjustment to their plan. All of these calculators here, another time that we're recalculating their plan. Not just us who does this. Schools do this every day, and I know it because I've seen it that well. So it's something that we have to keep doing, and we'll see more of, and something to be aware of. So I think this breathes true. 5.5% of those, so 5 out of every 100 payments have been missed. 5 out of every 100 needing a phone call or multiple phone calls. You guys know better than me that sometimes it doesn't just take one phone call. It can take a fair few more than that to get onto a family. So some key themes about what we see in schools, and I think this might just be interesting to you, and some might be a surprise to you and some might be less so, and some might just be reaffirming as to what you see day in and day out that I think is worth mentioning. And real examples of how we see families go wrong. I think it's so critical for everyone in the school space to understand that, so they can get ahead of it, as we've spoken about. Number one is social pressures. And I don't know if this is spoken about enough. I know Catholic schools do it quite well, and they are just so open and receiving any communication from their parents so they can support. For every family that's making their struggles known to their school, there's another that really hides their financial hardship due to a variety of social pressures. This is, I see it in lots of different spaces. One I see it in a lot in is your regional space, and regional small community schools. You might be going to church with the same person who's collecting your fees. It's a small community and you're just scared that word could get around that you're struggling. 2, it might just feel embarrassing to say, look, at the moment I can't afford it, and I'm scared that I might have to pull my kid out, and you don't want the school to know that. Sometimes the school's like, no, that doesn't matter at all, but these pressures are still existing for parents. They'll still feel that. And it's important to even raise that to them and preface that that's the case. We know that it might feel, but you're not alone. This is happening to a lot of people right now. So it's worth having that conversation. I think it's not just regional, of course, though. I even see it from my 1,000 a year schools all the way to our 40,000 a year schools. There is still those pressures that will exist, whether it's, I've always wanted to send my child to this school. It's really important to me. That's always there. Recent case study, so one of the schools where we managed that whole entire school fee payment is 50% of the families considering withdrawing their enrollment. We did a bit of a survey of them. So they said, yes, I was, without Head Start, I was going to consider, or the flexibility I have now, I was going to consider disenrolling my child, which is obviously very important to the school. Hadn't previously told their school. So when he showed the school this data, they said, we knew about those 5 because we're giving them fee concessions. But those 5 never mentioned a thing. We'd happily give them a fee concession. We'd happily work with them on a plan. But that was so powerful that for them to see, no, families sometimes do not tell us when they're in trouble. So I think that's an interesting one to be aware of and stay ahead of as we move into these tougher economic times as well. Have workflows to understand, patterns to understand when families might be in this situation early on. I think aspirational families is another one to think about. And what I mean when I say aspirational families is, for a lot of time, when you're moving your kid into whether it's a systemic or a fee-paying school for the first time, people don't realize the impact it's going to have on their budget. They keep their budget almost the same as what it exists before. And that can obviously cause some problems. They're like, oh, it's happening now. I'm not being too proactive about it. It'll work itself out. I suppose we think it doesn't happen, but you'd be amazed what we see, the amount of times that families will do this. So what we actually see at this time of year, and the reason why I came up with this point is I just see it so much with our partner schools, is families when their first year is happening, sometimes they might have a bit of a cash reserve. They might have delusions of grandeur is probably going a bit too far, but they've saved up cash for that first year, and they go, cool, I might get a promotion, I might get some more, a pay rise, and it'll be fine as we move through. That this cash will carry us through, and we'll be able to get there. And sometimes by the time it gets to term 3 or term 4 of that first year, that pinch really starts to hit. That cash reserve has slowed, and they can no longer afford it with their consistent disposable income. And it's something that you can see patterns of every year. And I see schools do very well where they have frameworks for their first year families that are different to their frameworks from their existing families, and spot that pattern really early for those new families. We know how important an enrollment is and how much an enrollment is worth at your school. So we have to spot those ones early so they get the help and they can use good financial strategies to stay on top of their fees and sustain their enrollment at the school. I think both of those terms really move to an umbrella point here, which is bad credit options. So when those pressures and that aspiration can sometimes lead to families going down paths which they shouldn't, and they can easily snowball. We see this so much because we do have some loan facility products outside of our typical ones where we have to decline families. We really hate doing it because they've gone too far. They do everything they can to keep their kid at the school, everything, and potentially go down impulsive paths where they shouldn't, whether it's credit cards getting out of hand, personal loans that they go to that have really high and disproportional interest rates when it gets out of hand, often compounds their financial burden rather than solving it like they think it might. So it's something that's important to be aware of that our families will do. Sometimes we think that they're not going down this path, but I think credit cards as well is something to really think about. It's obviously fine. I think about half families will use credit cards for school fees, and that's okay. But when these rate rises are increasing as they are, and CPI is as well, it's very easy for the credit card debt to rack up and to lose control of that, and for that to snowball and to school fees to almost become a burden. So one to think about for sustainable facilities and purpose-built facilities. Right. Last point here, I know we're sitting at around moving towards 12:30, so I'll try and keep this quite succinct for you all. So there's a bit of time for questions if there are any. Robust payment cultures is a term we like to use a lot at Ed Start, and not for just our culture, but for our partner schools. Striking the balance between care and financial sustainability, never dropping one or the other. It's very easy to go up in one, but really lose control of the other. And I see it all the time. And it's one that we have to be obviously very aware of. Again, going back to the why, every child has the right to a Catholic education. I hear this all the time from our Catholic schools, and it is totally true. And we should always stick by this as our why for robust payment cultures, because these robust payment cultures make this possible. And the second one here is, I think, one that we should empathise, which is at the moment when there are lots of families potentially struggling, smaller and greater amounts, give your school the best possible chance and frameworks of identifying families who really need that financial support due to financial hardship. Not just those who are potentially not budgeting correctly and need more planning. We can solve that in other ways. But we really need to find ourselves that litmus test to understand, no, wait, this family needs our care more than anything else. All families need care, but some really need that financial care. Some of the key strategies, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I know I'm not. This is probably stuff that you do back to front each day. It might be reaffirming again to you. But some 4 key pieces that I see be I say market leader in schools. So if you're doing all these 4 things, fantastic. And I'm sure a lot of you are. But I just want to sort of, with our cross-section of schools, pull them out for you. One, which is our clear communication about fees that states fee collection policies and payment options available. Obviously, for your systemic schools and any Catholic schools who are run by a broader governing body, this might be dictated to you, but it's still something that you can communicate yourselves as a school, and you will be communicating anyway. For non-systemic, it can be something that you have more charge of completely as a whole. we see this being important with the payment options available. Need to keep it succinct so it's clear the different things that are possible. Sometimes offering everything under the sun makes it more complex and gets more families falling behind and harder to keep track of. So it's a good one to stay clear and succinct on. The fee collection policy is also a good one. You might do things in the background to help families with flexibility and pastoral care. That's totally fine and should happen. But what you communicate outwardly should be clear and potentially a little bit more strict is probably not the right word than what you do in reality. That way it's really clear to families, oh no, this is a thing, this is really important for me to stay on top of. And it is that first thing that allows you to understand and have that litmus test over families who do need the support because they're actually falling behind. They're not just taking what they've got for granted. Great. The second one here, I think I've alluded to this a decent amount, so I don't need to dwell on it for too long. Spotting patterns early and have workflows that allow you to act proactively and with care at the forefront. A lot of schools I've seen do well if there's a few missed payments or even two, there's immediately a phone call just to check it's okay and not let it get too out of hand and not set up a new plan too late. It's really important for us when we do our work, as is the top one. We make sure that we stick to what a school would do as well. We spot that pattern early, we get on the phone to them and we have not a bit of conversation. It's more a let's work together, let's collaborate. It's a partnership between us and the family. Third one here, healthy credit options to avoid the ugly paths that parents go down. This is where sometimes someone like EdStart comes in. There's other services out there that do things similar to us. We have loan facility options that are purpose built for schooling, for secondary school, where parents can extend up to 5 years after their school date. And essentially what we do is we say, this is your payment and repayment for all your entire period, and you're only paying interest on what we've paid the school up front. So we're paying the school up front like they normally would termly, and they're coming back to us. This is a healthy credit option because it's uses projections of what school fee increases might go into. It's purpose built just for that, and it's sustainable. It can be flexed and it can be changed throughout with no change of interest rate. So it reacts to how the family is actually feeling. Even getting in front, I think, with families outside of EdStart or outside of an option like EdStart, making sure that they know, you obviously can't give financial advice, but getting in front of, if you're going down bad credit paths like personal loans or credit cards, having those conversations and just checking that they're okay, I think is really important. We can't give financial advice, but we can obviously check in. The last one here is proactive family budgeting tools that allow families to pay school fees in line with their income. It's something that we find is super powerful. We've got products that aren't those loan ones that we spoke about, that are more just payment plans across the 52 weeks of the calendar year, which I know a lot of schools do similarly with direct debits. And what they allow is like pulling out fees on a Tuesday, because that's when the family gets their income. When we set up any plan with a family, we look at when their income comes in. We make sure we set the date just after that. That way, we're only getting families missing payments usually if they're actually falling behind and they're in trouble. I mean, it's something that's really powerful. But just having that tool there, that families can break down the payments themselves and aren't paying in lump sums, gets ahead of families having to have very high level budgeting skills themselves, and allows you to be able to do that and manufacture that yourself as a school, which I think is critical, and even more critical the way the market's moving. Families these days, I know I do, and I know a lot of others do, pay for everything in payment plans, almost everything. It's there, weekly, fortnightly, monthly. You can set it up all in line with your income. Houses, whether it's phone plans, car plans, everything. And there's obviously a big rise in buy now, pay later, which can get you into bad areas, but the market's using it. So we have to be aware of it. And if people are using tools like that, instead of budgeting, we need to make sure in schools we have tools that allow us to sit in line with how families expect to pay for products and services. So that's a nice last one, I think, to finish on. I don't have any other content here to speak about, but happy to answer any questions across the board.
Alistair, I might make some observations, which is just really interesting. I think that, yeah, you can leave that last slide up, Alistair.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I think schools can really struggle to say, Catholic schools especially, very quick to offer full financial relief. And obviously, part of the key strategy here is to offer the right financial level of relief to the right family, but also by having a payment plan. I know your data, and this is not a Dorothy Dix, but I know your data says put the families on proper, well-constructed payment plans, more families pay their fees, and there's a greater net return to the school. So let's say if the perfect world at our Catholic primary school or Catholic secondary school is 100% of, let's say, year sevens or whatever the families in year seven, let's say, and let's say we're yielding 90% of the 100. If we could close that gap by 5% and bring it to 95% or 96% just by adopting payment plans, that is a net return plus to the school, which means maybe another staff member, which means maybe another piece of facilities gets done, which maybe means the curriculum gets enhanced in some way. So this is really critical stuff here. Tell us just in a snapshot, without going oversell on EdStart, but just how does it work? Like, does EdStart pay the I know there's a couple of different models, and I don't want to go through all the business models, but in simple terms, a school could sign up with EdStart. EdStart could handle all the fee collection and is remitting the full amount to the school. Is that how it works?
Correct. So basically, we remit a termly amount usually to the school, and we pay that amount for all the families that are working with us, and we collect the fees from that family the following term. And that'll just is how it works across the board for all the different types of products. Some are direct to parents and some are direct to schools. But yeah, that is as simply as it has. And I think I'll jump on your point as well, Greg, and how important it is for payment plans if we can just get that 5%. Thinking about things outside that 5%, like the enrollments that could be saved, I think is really powerful. If we go back to that case study I went to, where it was for every family that's telling you there's a problem, there's another family who's potentially an attrition for not being a problem. If you're capturing one or two of those families, depending on your government funding at a school, alone, let alone the school fees, that again can make such a huge difference to what you can invest in as a school. So yeah, powerful.
Just wondering, Margaret, if there's any questions coming in from the group. We want to finish on time in about 6 minutes. So we promise we will finish on time. It's 12:38 Melbourne time here. We'll finish in 7 minutes. There is a special offer we want to make to everyone. So we want to make sure you stay on for that special offer. Margaret, any questions or any thoughts from you?
There's been no questions coming in through the chat. So if anyone does have a question, you can just write it in the chat, and we can make sure that Alistair attends to that. It's Alistair, you know, the picture of what is still to come shows that it's not going to be getting any easier. Yeah. You know, I think even just recognizing that we're working in a space, and whilst we perhaps feel like we're starting to come out of some of the actual COVID, you know, lockdowns and what have you, the financial implications are certainly ongoing. And this is going to be something that we're dealing with, I would say, probably for a few years at least.
Yeah, it's something these families haven't experienced almost a long time in their financial independence. Some of them, if they're having primary school age children, it's something that they haven't experienced in their financial independence as much, or especially whilst having children. And I just think, an interesting point.
And we know that the fees are increasing at an alarming rate, of course, right across the board. For all sorts of legitimate reasons, and people's salaries are not keeping abreast with those. So rather than throw up our hands and do nothing, there are tools available out there, and whether it's EdStart or another company that you're working with, or helping. Look, many families don't budget and don't even know how to budget, and just rapidly spiral into the trap. We don't want to rapidly spiral them into the trap that they say, well, I can't afford St Trinian's Catholic Secondary School. I'm going to pull my kids out and go to, Malvern Primary School. So what we want to keep families in the system. So let's keep those families in the system, and let's give them tools and work with people like EdStart to help just see what options there might be for your school. And maybe this is not the right option for your school. But I think giving people want choice more than ever before. Gone are the days that we just could send everyone a letter in the mail and they get their fee statement once a year, and you pay your $10,000 or your $15,000 at the end of the year. Well, not many people have got 10, 15, 20, 25,000 just sitting in their bank ready to go, they pay those fees, bang. But we all know look, think of ourselves. You go onto that monthly credit card debt. How many of us have got monthly credit cards coming out for, Apple and, Netflix and God knows what, just comes out every month and it's manageable. So I think this idea of manageable payment plans will help keep the system strong and help keep the school strong. Margaret, any closing thoughts from you before we come down with the offer?
No, we've had no, but something just hit home as you were saying that it is as simple, as have it becoming part of your family budget, having those fees coming out like a Netflix payment, like a phone payment. You would, families, they really wouldn't think about not having those payments come out. So
Right.
if we can simplify that and systemize it as much as you can. And I know certainly the Catholic school I was at, I think they did it really well. And it created an awful lot of work for people in the admin office, which I'm sure everyone here kind of can attest to as well. It's not necessarily simple, but it certainly is a service that Catholic schools do better than most.
And what we like to add at Catholic Schools Guide, we like to provide products to our world that uses technology out there to make things better and easier for families and better and easier for the schools. There's lots of tech out there that can be a little overwhelming when you feel, oh, I don't like that. I just want to keep doing what we've always done. And if we keep doing what we've always done, guess what? We're going to get the same result. So if we want to improve fee collection and we want to improve performance in that space, try something a little different. Put a toe in the water and do some investigations with companies like Edstar. Which probably is the right moment to thank everyone. I want to thank Alistair, obviously, for being with us today. And obviously, this is a part of a 3-part series. We had our first session last week, which was recorded, and all 80 people who've registered for this webinar series 1, 2, and 3 will get recordings today. This recording has obviously been recorded, and we will send that out early next week to you. So again, please feel free to share that with your world. But let's talk about, we've got another session, of course, next week, Thursday, the 1st of September. Can't believe we're already in September, Margaret. Is our last of our Lunch and Learn series, and we hope to do this again next year. But of course, we want to talk a bit about Catholic Schools Guide and what we're prepared to offer and help schools, because maybe this can help you. What we want to do is, as in celebration and sort of coming out of COVID, we know that we're still battling with that, and we're still trying to get inquiries. The lifeline of every single school is inquiries. What we want to do, and I think you've got another slide up here for me, Margaret, if you can jump onto that next slide for me, it'd be great. We want you to go to your Catholic Schools website for us. Go and check your listing, because you should have one. But there's schools with a full featured page listing. And we've got a real surprise. We've got an offer that can give your school go from the line listing to a full, beautiful featured page listing all this year and all next year, actually at no cost. So there is a few little T's and C's around it. So if you're in WA, South Australia, Northern Territory, regional Victoria, regional New South Wales, regional Queensland, Tassie, ACT, which is a lot of the schools on the group today, you're going to get that for free. So please contact us about your upgraded listing. Talk to us. There's no tricks. There's no smoke and mirrors. It's just our way of saying thanks and our way of helping schools to drive a little bit more awareness of their product across Australia. Because now more than ever before, people are moving around, aren't they, Margaret? They're relocating, they're changing, they're moving interstate, they're doing the sea change, the tree change, all that sort of thing, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And I think that's the appropriate note to wrap this up so people can get on with their afternoon. Alistair, I would like to say a huge thank you for making time to present today. You know, we can all see there's lots of effort gone in to make sure that we're communicating this to Catholic schools in the best way that we can. And obviously, Edstar are as passionate about best practices in schools as we are at Catholic Schools Guide. So thank you for today.
I appreciate it.
And for everyone else, we'll be sending you a copy, as Greg said, of the recording, contact details for Edstar. And of course, you will be receiving a reminder for our topic next week, which is creating exceptional family engagement in the enrolment process. So again, another topic that's more relevant than ever as education becomes more and more competitive. So you'll receive a reminder about this event again next week. But for now, we wish you having a very productive afternoon, and we will see you next week.